So, as you might have heard, East and West now have a proper synthesizer library in their catalog. But is it really a synthesizer? Let's take a deeper look. Hi there, this is Sam with Second Tier Sound. Really nice to see you here again. So let's take a deeper dive into the Forbidden Planet by East West. Before, I just wanted to mention though that I'm not sponsored by East West. They have not asked me to produce this video, nor do they have any say in how I produce it. But they give me access to the library, of course, so let's keep that in mind. But what is the Forbidden Planet by East West? Well, as they put it themselves, it's a 20-year journey into the analog synthesizers. And that's the first thing to note. This is an analog synthesizer sounding library, not a vast library of different kinds of synthesizers, but it's very well produced and it can fit a lot of your different kinds of scoring. First thing I noticed though, that this is not actually a synthesizer, not like an FM synth where you create your own sounds from scratch, but rather a lot of presets that are very useful that you can still manipulate quite a bit. Let's take a deeper look. Let's listen to the sounds of this beast so you get an idea what it has to offer. Now let's go through all the different sections. We have first arpeggiators, and that means that all the sounds are obviously arpeggiated. I do want to say though that most of the sounds here you can turn off the arpeggiator and it becomes a normal sound, or you can take any sound and it makes it arpeggiated. So it's not a recorded arpeggiated sound, it's actually in engine, which is nice. Let's try a sound in the analog bed here. And as you can see, I moved this little planet or this moon around and it affected the sound a bit, so it has some movement. I'm going to talk more about all these controls later on. Let's just listen to the sounds now. All right, let's check out some of the driving analog sounds here. Obviously, you can change the rate of all these arpeggios if you want them faster or slower. Let's take a look at some of the film bed hybrids. Yeah, some really lovely sounds, well recorded. And we have some moving pads, which is sort of a pad that has movement in it, not just an arpeggiator. Kind of nice. You can have a pad that then suddenly has a little bit of movement in it. I like that. They have the bass sound, and these are the hardest to show really. But what's really great about them is that you can mesh with them due to how they're built up. So let's, for example, we can take a Galaxian bass. If you just listen to the preview, you might not think so much about it, but you can see here you can do so much with the sound. And most of these have a glide in them so that if you just press it once, you get a nice attack. But as soon as you play legato, you get that sliding effect. And then you can sort of, by moving these filters up and down, really create the sound you want, like other or... And that goes for all the bass sounds. So I'm going to show one more. There's actually one that is quite fun, the Death Dungeon, that has all these crazy sounds. Sounds like a drill in your brain almost. All right, let's get on with the drones. And these are actually quite nice. The only problem here I find that a lot of them have, you see, it just says chordal mood drone and then a number. And so you kind of have to go through all of them to really find the ones you like. So use the favorite button, I would say. Let's listen to some of these here. Really nice to create some good backdrops or atmospheres very quickly with still a lot of movement in there. Let's take a look at some deep musical ones. They're quite similar, but just a little bit different. Maybe more musical, more harmony in there. Almost sound better if you just hit one key, but you can try with chords as well. And let's try some deep noise. I find this is more of the sort of meditative or perhaps disturbing. I wouldn't meditate on this one. You get the idea, but they're very useful. Let's try another one here. The great thing about this is that the evolving is not just the wave pad that is evolving, it's actually you doing it by moving this little moon about, or your controllers. I do want to say that these sounds are excellent. They're very well produced, very, very high quality. And that's something I find that some other libraries don't have. But then the download is quite large. I'll talk more about that later. Okay, let's look at emotive control. These are really beautiful. All right, let's also look at sci-fi horror. Then we have some FX, and this is fun, but I don't know if I would use this a lot. I mean, if I sound design, I probably want a little bit more control, but I have to say that some of these sounds are pretty fun. Let's check out the dark voices. So each key then, I don't know if all of them, but most of them are different samples. So it's not just one sound. Quite fun. We can look at this freak show as well. Let's go over to leads. Some of them I really like is these Android sounds here, Android Seeker. There are very wide, beautiful sounds. Reminds me of a movie, actually. An Epic Doom, well, it's kind of what it sounds like. Let's try one here. Ultra distorted, good for Doom, basically. Yeah, fits that really well. Try one more. Actually, a really good ba sound. Very distorted. Very nice. Let's take a look at the liquid analog. Some of them are a little bit similar here, but yeah, there's a nice variety and it definitely fits the analog style. Let's try one more. All right, then we have the rap one. I'm not so well versed in rap. I don't dislike it, but I wouldn't know how to play. But these sounds, I think, lend themselves quite well to certain styles of rap. Let's try one here. Let's try this one. Then we have World Hybrid. This is kind of cool. This is where they mix some of the other libraries in with hybrid sounds. And in some cases, it's really effective. So you get the dynamics of an acoustic instrument with a synth. Really nice. Works quite well. Let's try one more. So sometimes with some of these instruments, look out for the ranges because I think the sample sets they come from were limited or they were just following the real instrument. So there were more notes than in actual real life. So sometimes the ranges are quite short. Let's see here. All right, and then we also have pads, and this is probably my favorite section here. I use pads quite a bit. Let's look at Analog Armageddon. Perfect for that warm analog sound. And let's take a look at firepower. This is really fun. Like all of these work really well. And if you want that epic, enormous, mega nasty sound, this is the way to go. Any of them works actually. Yeah, this sound really goes up to 11. So try any of those. I'm not going to show you more. I promise you will enjoy those. All right, let's look at the Forbidden Planet. Very nice, that one. Yeah, it's really high quality, these sounds. Let's try another one. Sort of analog 70s sound here. Okay, let's try future analog. An orchestral hybrid. This is quite fun because they have added, orchestral sounding patches with synths and created really nice sounds that are very useful. Okay, and Planet Death. It's quite fun. It's what it sounds like. And then we have warm analog, which is a lot what I like here. Warm, nice analog synths. Yeah, lovely. Then we also have Polysynths here. Let's look at a few here. Yeah, really warm, big piano pad, so to speak. We also have some songwriter patches here. Some of them you can maybe recognize where they come from without playing the original, of course. Yeah, you actually get sort of a piano pad in some of these. Quite fun. Okay, that's pretty much it. I know I skipped quite a few sounds there, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight without boring you too much of the sounds. And there are a lot of good sounds here that are really, really useful. If you don't want to go through each of these sounds, which I actually recommend you do if you own this product and really favorite what you like, then you can always check out the quick start folder here, which has just a little bit of few of the best stuff that you might need in these different categories. But that's pretty much how this synthesizer sounds. So let's take a deeper look at the interface so you really master this stuff. So here on the left side, you have X fade, and it's quite straightforward. Basically, most patches consist of two sounds, source A and source B. And when you have the fade all the way to the left, you hear only one sound. And you have it all the way to the right, you hear source B. And then you can obviously just mesh them so you can have whatever you want. Somewhere in the middle, maybe. I don't know. You can also move that with this little planet here and this nice interface. Then you have filter, which is mostly expression, or it's linked to CC11. And in this case, it's a filter that you can use. I'm going to talk more about how you can manipulate that filter later on, but this is how it works. Basically, you cut off frequencies. Very nice. So just by these two, which you can move right here, you can do a lot of changes. And especially if you have them attached to a controller, you can do nice changes on the fly. Then we have attack, which is basically, you know, what it sounds like. How fast is the attack of the sound? Quick attack or a slow one? That way you can make any sound into a pad or a polysynth, or almost at least. You can make that change here. And also the release, obviously. Slower release when I lift the keys. It goes on, or it can be a very quick release. Stops immediately. Then we have the global FX volume, and this is a slider for all the effects that are currently on. In this case, it's just a reverb, but if you go all the way to the left, it will be a very dry sound. And then I can have obviously more reverb right there. Kind of nice. And again, if you put a MIDI controller to this one, you can affect a lot of things on the fly, which is very nice. Then the step LFO depth, the arpeggiator gate, and the glide time, we'll talk a little bit more later. Then we have an amp envelope, and this is something that all instruments of East West has, more or less at least. And you can just, you know, tweak this to change the sound a little bit in terms of how it starts and how long it goes on and decay and release. It's kind of similar to this, but all instruments have that. Then we have something that I'm scratching my head at a little bit, and this is the waveform source A and B, because they have no function. It shows you the wave file you're playing. This is source A and this is source B, and you can look at them, but you can't do anything to it here. You can't change them, which I think is a great shame. Looks cool, and it might change a little bit depending on what effects you put on, but otherwise it's just there. Then we have these three things in the middle. We have the XY pad, which is on, which I showed you. And then we have the filter, which we will talk more about in a while. And then the arpeggiator. It's called MIDI, but it's an arpeggiator, which I'll also show you in a while. Then on the right side, we have transpose, very straightforward. Arpeggiator, basically, if you need it to be on, you can do that. And this means that not only arpeggiated sound can be arpeggiated, you know, pretty much any sound can be arpeggiated, or the arpeggiated sounds can be turned off and be used as a normal pad. But I can show one thing here. If we turn it on, I can put on something called glide. Listen to this. Or portamento. They're very similar, those two, but it's basically, I can show you here, you can change the timing a little bit, how quick you want that to be, but it's kind of a legato, you could say. So you can create a nice effect there as well. I'm going to turn this off for now. Then we have a ring modulator, which I'm not exactly sure what it does, but it messes with the sound. And each of these effects have an A and B, so you can affect the different sounds, obviously. But we want them both here, and if you have it on like this, it sounds like kind of a distortion, you know, bit plugin in a way that messes with the waveform. And perhaps some sweep filters also. Yeah, degrading, you could say. All right, I'm going to turn that off. Again, if you automate all these, you have a lot of options. Then we have a panner, which I really like. Most DAWs has an auto panner, but this is just easy to do, and you can put it to sync with your DAW. You have to have the headphones on to really hear these changes, but it's panning left and right by itself, and you can do it by syncing or by frequency. Then a really nice thing here that I think is especially useful here, Now, most instruments of East West has this built in, but it's quite a good stereoizer, or whatever you call it. You have to turn it on and you have to move the spread how much you want it to. But listen to, I turn it off first. Listen to this chord without it. Now listen with. It's really a lot wider and it lends itself really well to this synthesizer. So use that one. Left and right is just based a little bit on what channel is using, but it doesn't really matter. You can try both and see if it makes any difference. Then we have plugins here that are built in. It's an amplifier and a chorus. One thing you have to make sure though, that this is just for sound A and this is just for sound B. So depending on where your X fade is, if it's all the way to the left and you're messing with the B, you won't hear any changes because the sound is not on. So I'm going to put it in the middle. So if I put amp A, now it's 100%, which is a little bit too much, I think so, but it's kind of a distortion. And then you can do the chorus, obviously, same thing. Kind of nice to add effect there too. All right. Again, if you move this global FX volume, anything that's on here will also be affected by that one, how much you will hear. So the delay effect is quite interesting. You have to turn it on, obviously, for it to work. One thing that you might forget is that delay channel is what you want if you want the delay effect. The pre-reverb is a little bit a subtle effect, more like a pre-delay in a way. So you turn it on there and you can sync it to your DAW. And you can add a little bit more level if you want to hear it more. You can add some repeat time, or drive, and flutter if you want it strange. There you go. Very nice. I'm going to turn it off now. And then we have reverb, and you have quite a lot of reverbs to choose from here. Let's try something else. We can turn a planetary manifestation. Seems like it's fitting. We can try a long one here. It's very big. And you can obviously put on a pre-delay here as well. And again, you can always change it here or here how much level you want on. Then we have something called master, which I don't, well, it looks cool, but that's about it. You can change, obviously, the output, which is cool. You can mute and solo and pan, but you normally do that in your DAW, and you can change the volume if that's necessary. Otherwise, this is kind of a filler. That looks cool, to be completely honest. So let's take a look at the middle section where it becomes a little bit more complicated, but still not very difficult. We have the XY pad, which we used before to affect the sound, as you can see. But then we also have the filter section here, which is quite nice. But there's a few things that you might want to look into so you understand more how it works. Here we have the cutoff, which is the same as the filter here, right? But there are a few things you can do. You know, let's just listen to it here. We have sound. Right. You can also affect the resonance here. And what can we say about it? Well, it's used to define how broad or narrow the range of frequencies around the cutoff frequencies are. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you have it more to the right, it's a little bit sharper. Hard to hear if you don't have headphones. And a little bit smoother if you go to the left. I would say this is not actually the best sound for this, to be completely honest, but it does change the sound, and it can be a very nice effect to do some quick changes if you want to make your sound a little bit different. Then we have the type of filter down here, and I'm trying not to nerd out completely. I want to be brief here, but I want to explain what this is. We have 4 different filters, and what does it all mean? Well, a ladder filter is something that most analog synths were using, and a ladder filter, it's basically about how it looked like when you constructed it on a piece of paper, when you wrote out the circuit board, you could say. Somebody who knows this better will correct me exactly, but trust me, this is more or less what you need to know. And the state variable filter is a little bit different filter, and I think it would be more advanced. You can have more peaks and holds in there. But I don't hear any difference, to be completely honest. Maybe a diehard nerd who knows synthesizers can hear or feel the difference, but I can't. What's more interesting, though, is the LP and the HP, which stands for low pass and high pass. And I'm going to demonstrate what that is if you don't know. I'm going to show you a little bit here in EQ, in Cubase. And here we have these filters. So if I move this thing up and down, you can see that I'm cutting off at the red area, the low frequencies. This means I'm passing the high frequencies. They get a pass. They can be on. See? So the higher frequencies are untouched. Well, more or less, unless I go up there, obviously. But the lower frequencies are cut out. The same way I can do a low pass filter. I can then sort of let the lower filters, lower frequencies, be let on and I can cut the higher frequencies. It's a bit confusing because here they called high and low cut, which is easier to remember, but you can also call them high pass and low pass. So high pass, again, is when you let the higher frequencies not be touched so much. You cut the lower ones. And the low pass is when you cut the higher frequencies. And what does 4P stands for, or 2P? Well, these stands for poles. And I'm going to show you again what that means here in this filter. So let's put this on here. And you see that this curve here is quite strong, quite going down quite quickly. Well, what is poles then? Well, one pole is 6 decibels cut per octave. And you can see basically that this curve is much wider. So you allow for more frequencies to be played. It's not so quick, right? If you have 2 poles, 12 decibels, you see it's a little quicker. 3 poles, and so on. And so 4 poles is a very, very strong cut. It cuts off very quickly. So depending on what poles you use, on 2 poles, you get a little bit of wider sound. You don't cut all the frequencies. And 4 poles, you cut very much more quickly, more narrow, the filters you're using. So let's pick this one again, and you can just hear what it sounds like here. Right? So I'm using then a low pass. If I use a high pass, it works the same, but in reverse. Right? So it's just, you can look at that way. There we go. So let's take a look at these 3 knobs then. If you turn these up and down, you notice that nothing happens. Nothing. Why is that? Well, you have to turn them on first. And that's why I feel like there should be a turn on button here, or a little bit clearer, because you go back and forth and nothing happens, right? So there it was. So you have to turn the step LFO. There we go. And there's a few things here. There's also a little bit tricky, but I will try to explain it. Here we go. We can sync it to a rate. Let's just take 8 notes and let's see what it sounds like now. You see, there's a rhythm going on here based on this synced 8th notes. Let's have all notes straight like this. So now we see we have all 8s. We have the 8th pattern here, and I can drag these up and down to get a little bit different values on how much strong the effect will be. It's quite subtle, but you can make different rhythms that way. And you can also just drag this back and forth and get different random, rhythms. And then you can use the gates and the slew to sort of smooth or sharpen the endings and the beginnings of the gate. So let's see if I have a more open gate or open slew. But I can also be a lot sharper. All right, and I can paint different things like that. All right, so that's a way to, it's not an arpeggiator, it's just more of a rhythm maker, you can say. LFO, people know what it means who play synthesizers. Now, what's tricky to understand here is that if I go up here, I won't really hear anything. And that is because the LFO is now on the plus side. It's going beyond the values here. So that's why I don't hear anything. I have to go below, because if I go too high, I have to then change the amp and go lower. So you can't go beyond the maximum value. That's the easiest way I can explain it. But in practical terms, you can have a higher value, but then lower the amp envelope a little bit and get a different sound. Or you can go the other way around. You lower and you can raise the amp value. All right, I'm going to turn that one off. Then we have mod envelope. And this works exactly the same as this amp envelope, but it's not affecting the sound per se as this one is. It's affecting how the sound is moving, you could say. So we'll turn it on. Put this here. And then we're going to put this in the middle again. And we'll see nothing will happen. But as soon as I move this down again, just as I did, we'll see it's actually following this curve, which you can then obviously change around here in any way you like. So you're creating a movement, right? And the further down I go, it almost disappears. Now, if you feel like it's going too low and it's disappearing, you can always raise the amp envelope here a little bit here. Right. So play around with those a little bit if you don't get a change. So again, the filter is basically where you cut things off. You can move this around. The resonance is to change the sound a little bit, sharper and smoother, I would say. And the step LFO is creating a rhythm out of it by having a sort of a gate comes back and forth at different rates. And then the mod envelope is doing sort of a movement of the sound itself, which can create a lot of different interesting sounds. All right, let's take a look at the arpeggiator as well. And you have to go into the MIDI file here. So let's just see what happens if I turn these both on and I hit the chord. You can see how it's playing there. Very straightforward. I can change, I can have latch, so that means I don't have to hold down the keys. Or I can have latch plus, that means that each key I add will start to sound in that order I play it. And so on. Then you can see that there are different targets here. You can change it to filter, volume, and pan. So you can basically paint here whatever you want. You can either make them fatter or smaller, or you can do them shorter. So you can create different patterns here. That's kind of nice. And obviously you want to do some changes here as well. And this is good because then you can create a little bit more variety here. And then you can obviously change the grid so we can have faster. And you can have different grids for the different sounds, which also creates some variety. And then you can change if you want up or down, and input order. I wish there was a little bit more options there, but it's pretty okay. And then you can obviously choose the glide and the porta as I showed before to get that different effect. But the kind of cool thing is that you can do something very randomly. You can have one thing here, and then you can have something completely different here. We can have glide there. We can have a different effect. We can have up and down on that one. We can have just up here, and we can change how many octaves, and we can change it to filter. So not the best sound I've ever created, but I just wanted to show you that there's quite a lot of options here anyway, even though this arpeggiator is quite basic. But anyway, that's the interface. So it's my wish that you have a greater understanding of how this synth really works and that you know better now if this is for you or not. I do want to say though, without trying to sell you anything, you can always try a month subscription to see if it's for you or not, and if it isn't, you haven't lost that much. Anyway, now I wanted to talk about what I like about this synth and what I think could be greatly improved. So, the great thing is that it actually sounds very good. It has great quality. I don't know if I should call it recorded quality, but the wave files just sound excellent. Very, very good stuff everywhere, and no glitches, no problems. It does what you want to do, so it's really satisfying. And it's easy to get into, at least on a superficial level. You know, you just find a patch and then you just manipulate it a little bit so you get the sound that you want. It also looks great. I know that might seem silly, but it actually adds to the atmosphere, to the inspiration, and also the way it's laid out. It's quite easy to understand what you want to do. Maybe a little trickier to go under the hood, which I showed in the video, but to get started, there's no problem here. And it's really great that East West now finally has a real synthesizer in the catalog. So it's very good for adding to your hybrid tracks. And I think you can do quite a lot with the synthesizer in most of your tracks. So let's talk about what I don't think it's so good. And if East West by any chance happen to see this video, I'm hoping that these are things you can actually change and improve the synthesizer so it becomes even better. So the first thing that stood out for me is that when you load a patch, most of them are a combination of two sounds. This is really excellent and you can do a lot of tweaks here. But if you know the Opus browser, that is really great. You can click on any patch and then you can hear a sample of what the sound is. This is really excellent. It makes it easier to find things. But you will never hear the sound B in the patch, which might be obvious to you, but that means that you will never know what you're gonna get. So you have to load a sound in order to know what the different sounds are. You have to modulate, you have to use the mod wheel in order to hear the sound. And the second thing about this is that you cannot choose what sounds you want in the A and the B. And I think this is really a missed opportunity. Most other synths I know who do a similar concept here, you can choose what you want on A and B, which makes it much more creative. You can create your own sounds by combining things you want yourself. And I really wish that East West, if it's possible, could change this. There's a lot of sounds, but a lot of them are quite similar. But I think it would be better if there would be less patches that are more dissimilar. Also, I find that it's a little bit fiddly to go into the controls. I know I said before that it's quite easy to get into, and I stand by that. But if you really want to tweak things, it's not always so obvious what it means. Hopefully, with this video now, it is. The download is really big. I was surprised. I mean, most synthesizers, they're quite small because it's mostly processing power. But this is because there's a lot of samples. And it's actually bigger than another enormous synthesizer, and you need to have space on your hard drive. It's also quite expensive for what you get. I mean, if you love analog synths, and this is a fantastic haven, right? But if you need it for a lot of different things, then it's quite pricey for what you get, I think. Also, I find that the effects, and specifically arpeggiator, are a little bit underwhelming. There could be so much more you could do with the arpeggiator, and I think they could upgrade this. Most other synths I know to do a similar thing, there's more variety, more power in the arpeggiator. Random or different ways it goes up and down, and it's just kind of up and down. That's what I think about it. If you have the subscription, I think this is a great addition and you should really use it and play around with it. There's a lot of fun sounds here that are very useful. So it's my sincere wish that you'll learn something from this video, that it was useful, that you enjoyed it. If you did any of those, you can always let me know by hitting that like button. Perhaps subscribe if you want more of my videos. You can also become a patron, or you can check out my affiliate links down below. Thank you very much for sticking through, and I hope to see you soon in another video. Take care.